So, why are some people publicly leaving the left? In this explainer, we're digging into a viral video that claims a major political shift is underway. We're going to walk through the source's own evidence to really understand the story that it's trying to tell.
The entire argument of this video really hinges on this one quote. The idea isn't that people are slowly drifting away, but that they have a sudden moment of realization, a point where, like the quote says, you just cannot unsee what you've seen. It really sets the stage for a journey of disillusionment. So, what's the core claim here? Well, the video asserts that we are witnessing nothing short of an exodus. It argues that a growing wave of public figures, celebrities, and even just regular people are all making a very public break from the political left. To back this up, the video presents this really diverse list of examples. It points to figures from politics, it mentions Jean-Pierre, which likely means former press secretary Jen Psaki, all the way to the world of culture, with artists like Demi Lovato and Doja Siwa. And by also including transgender New Yorkers, the source makes the case that this isn't just some celebrity trend, but something that's happening on the ground, too. And this quote is used as a prime example of that grassroots shift. The source uses this man-on-the-street interview to make a really specific point, that identities that were once considered a lock for the left are starting to splinter, as people begin to separate their personal identity from a prescribed political one. So what does the source say is actually driving this supposed exodus? Well, the first major reason it puts forward is this internal culture of infighting, which it describes as having impossible standards and ideological purity tests. According to the video's logic, this culture of public shaming is actually backfiring. The source argues that the constant fear of being canceled for even minor mistakes doesn't create loyalty. Instead, it just alienates allies and pushes anyone with even moderate or questioning views right out of the tent. The source video uses some really specific stories to make this point. It highlights the intense backlash against J.K. Rowling, it tells the story of a woman who was kicked out of a party for her hairstyle, and it points to labels being used to shut down any kind of debate. These are all held up as evidence of ideological purity tests that are pushing people away. And this quote is used to really capture that feeling of being squeezed out. The argument being made is that all the nuance has just disappeared. You're either a perfect ally who accepts all the rules without question, or you're the enemy. The source claims this rigid, with us or against us mindset is what ultimately forces people to leave. Okay, then the source turns to the language of identity itself as another reason people are leaving. By laying out these complex identity pipelines, the video argues that the conversation has become so convoluted and, well, contradictory that it's alienating people. The intended takeaway seems to be that it feels ungrounded, maybe even nonsensical, and that pushes away people who just can't follow the logic anymore. The next set of arguments moves from that internal culture to external policy. The source shifts its focus to what it frames as these glaring contradictions in the left's worldview and its political stances. This slide captures a central pillar of that argument about hypocrisy. The source points to what it sees as a major disconnect in progressive values. It contrasts the fierce defense of LGBTQ+ rights here in the West with what it describes as support for regimes where being gay can be a capital offense. The video then pivots to the media, arguing that a radical shift in language is shaping and maybe distorting political reality. It cites data showing mentions of the term white supremacy in major newspapers skyrocketing from just 75 in 2010 to over 7,000 in 2020. And the video really drives this point home with another statistic. It claims that between 2013 and 2019, mentions of white and racial privilege surged by 1,500% in those same newspapers. The argument here is that the media isn't just reporting on reality anymore, but is actively creating what this source calls a race-obsessed narrative. This media narrative, the source argues, connects directly to real-world policies that spark fear. It points to things like weapon amnesty programs in Australia, which it specifically labels machete drop boxes, a perception that the justice system is favoring criminals, and an embrace of socialist ideas as tangible reasons that former supporters now actually fear for their safety. The source wraps up this section with a quote from actress Raven-Symoné. Her words are presented as a rejection of what the video calls constant othering. The point being made is that this relentless focus on group identity, while maybe intended to be empowering, can end up feeling like it's denying individuals their simpler, shared national identity. So, all of this builds to the final point. The source doesn't just explain why people are leaving the left, it also tries to define where it claims they're going politically. A key turning point, according to the video, is a loss of faith in the established media. It claims that when people feel they've been misled by these curated, out-of-context clips, especially regarding controversial figures like Donald Trump, they start doing their own research and often come to radically different conclusions.
And here's the key. It's a political reframing. The source argues that this isn't a shift to modern conservatism, but a return to something it calls classical liberalism. And it defines this ideology specifically in opposition to what the source calls postmodern lefty nonsense.
So these are presented as the foundational, time-tested principles that those leaving the left are now trying to conserve. The argument is that these core Enlightenment values are being abandoned by the modern left, and so the act of conserving them is what now defines this new political identity. And so, that brings us to the central question posed by the source material. The video weaves together all these anecdotes, data, and testimony to make its case, but it leaves the viewer to wonder, is this just a fringe viewpoint, or are these the first tremors of a much larger political realignment? That's really the core of the debate this source wants to start.